Xbox finally chimes in on the future of exclusives and Xbox. Unless you have been living under an Xbox-shaped rock, you probably already know what's going on in the neighborhood. Microsoft, its exclusives, Xbox, and what is the future of it? Because for the past 72 hours or so, we've been hearing Sea of Thieves, Hi-Fi Rush, Starfield, Indiana Jones, and maybe other titles are going to be going to the PlayStation. And so Microsoft has finally broken their silence, and Phil Spencer has shared a statement which I may or may not calm the nerves of Xbox fan. At least Phil Spencer is saying, we are listening and we hear you. We've been planning a business update event for next week, where we look forward to sharing more details with you about our vision for the future of Xbox. Stay tuned. That is a big statement. There's a lot of things you can kind of pick apart from here. First off, the fact that they say that they have been planning a business update. Now, it's been believed that Xbox was actually planning to do this at the end of February, but as you all know, next week would be probably more like early to mid-February, which as a kind of an outside observer actually tells us a couple things, right? Microsoft just can't have an event like this, right? They got to put it together. They got to have slides, videos, and talks, and all that sort of stuff. And when you're doing all that, that means you got to tell more and more people about your plans, like what is happening, how are we going to present this, when are we going to present it, all that sort of stuff, which means that there's more people who might actually start talking to insiders and sharing like what's going to be shared. Like, think about that, right? Microsoft is putting on an event, or Xbox is putting on an event. They're working on the narratives and more people know about it, which is very well could lead into the conversations that we've been hearing where these other titles are headed to other platforms, because again, Xbox is sharing that information now internally. Also, the fact that they've been planning this means that, hey, this is something that's been on the radar. It's not something that was just sort of drummed up overnight and said, you know what, we should put Starfield on PlayStation 5. So this is something very calculated by Microsoft, and clearly the hype wave, if you want to call it, and hype could be good or bad, I guess, in this scenario, depending on which side of the coin you're on, is sort of manifesting here. Now, there's been, like, when people see this type of news, there's been a lot of gut reactions of people saying the future of Xbox is dead. The future of consoles are over. Sony is just going to start selling PlayStation 5s for $1,000 because it has no competition. I think that is a very strong and very overreaction. Now, I will give you that the gaming community is probably the most passionate community that I'm at least part of. Now, I mean, that goes across many different spectrums, but at the end of the day, the gaming community is very attached to their console, their brand, and it has a lot of loyalty in it. So when rumors start flying around that games are going to other platforms, people have been like, hey, I've only bought Xbox. I've not been playing God of War games or whatever else on PlayStation because I've been supporting Team Green, and now Team Green is abandoning me. There's not a great response to that, because if Microsoft does bring all of its titles over to PlayStation, then you can feel betrayed. And if you've been around the Microsoft block before, you know that feeling. Like when they gave up on the Zune, when they gave up on Windows Phone, when they gave up on Media Center, when they gave up on Groove Music, the list goes on and on. If you've been around the Xbox or the Microsoft ecosystem, you've been burned a time or two, or the band, right? The band's it goes on and on and on. Now, Microsoft, in my opinion, is not giving up on gaming, not even in the slightest. They just spent $70 billion to walk away from something. They would get roasted by the board and shareholders over that. I think what we're starting to see is just a realization and sort of a manifestation of everything that Phil Spencer has been saying, kind of broadcasting for the past couple years, right? He keeps saying about bringing games to where the gamers are. And we all kind of read into that meaning cloud gaming, right? That was sort of the thing. But let's be real, cloud gaming hasn't taken off in the way that Xbox was likely hoping. And so again, they're looking at how do we drive more revenue? At the end of the day, Xbox is a business, PlayStation is a business, and their goal is to make as much money as possible. Now, for many generations, that means taking content and locking it behind a plastic paywall, the plastic paywall being the console that you must purchase. That narrative has started to kind of fizzle out a little bit. Now, the biggest holder of IP in that narrative is actually, in my opinion, Nintendo, not even close being Sony, right? Nintendo has its own sort of thing off in the distance, while PlayStation and Xbox are in this more of a head-to-head battle, if you will. Does this mean that Xbox is getting out of the gaming business or the hardware business? I don't really think that is true. First off, there's a lot of dumb reasons why Microsoft would do that, especially after buying all this IP to be like, no, don't buy our consoles. But what I will be super interested to see is what does Microsoft's next generation console look like? Because again, they're basically PCs these days, right? A high-end PC that sits under your device, or I should say a specialized PC that sits underneath your computer or underneath your TV in your living room. And so the difference between a traditional PC and a console has really contracted over the past couple generations, so specifically this latest one. However, we shouldn't really get too off of our rocker until we actually hear what Xbox is saying. And you know what? Kudos on them that they are actually putting out a statement, right? They feel the pressure. So what people are doing on social media, now keep in mind, please, for the love of God, be respectful. Do not do anything dumb that you would regret if your mother found out that those words came out of your mouth. But people have been rightfully so saying, Phil, we need to understand what you are doing with the brand that we love to see if we should continue supporting it. And so I guarantee right now, Microsoft is putting together very carefully crafted statements and projections about how they're going to deliver this sort of news. Because I do think that the rumors, if you will, that like Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush is less rumor because, I mean, we've seen tons of different bits of information like this data mine leak that says hey, it is actually happening. But Microsoft needs to be very, very, and I mean very careful about how they personify what the future plans are and why at the end of the day. Because Microsoft could very smartly say, like, look, if we can bring our Sea of Thieves, as it will, to a new populace and it drives in more revenue and more players, then hey, you're going to get more content and the longevity of the platform is going to increase by many, many, many years. And gamers might be very receptive to that. Starfield, on the other hand, is a bit harder to swallow because at the end of the day, you got things like Indiana Jones and Starfield that are recent titles. And it just doesn't feel as good. So Microsoft has to kind of bob and weave this line of like, okay, how do we justify Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush, which, you know, aren't top tier titles, like nothing against those titles in specific, but they're not Starfield. They're not Halo at the end of the day. And Microsoft very well might come out and say like, look, part of the deal was when we bought Activision, like we got to keep our titles on other platforms to keep regulators happy. That is a narrative that Microsoft could try to follow. How that impacts Starfield though, is a little bit more mushy because, hey, Call of Duty can't leave there. And Microsoft is just like, look, we know what the population base is and we need to bring our other titles over there. The super interesting thing now is that because Microsoft has Activision, they actually have a treasure trove of data of actually the habits of PlayStation players that they may not have had previously. And they might be looking at that data and saying, yep, this makes sense. And so anyways, Xbox has come out and clarified that they are doing something. And so now we got to sit here and wait while they try to get the date out. Usually Microsoft likes to do things on Tuesdays, sometimes Wednesdays, but it's an Xbox event, so we'll wait and see. But the reality is that Xbox is aware your social media pressure and alarm bells have been working. So again, just respectfully kind of keep your eyes and ears open to see what Team Green is going to be doing with their first party content as we all kind of sit and wait. But I suspect, like the past 72 hours, more information is going to leak out. So as always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here because the only BS on this channel is me.